All right. Hey, guys. So, another virtual coffee meeting. We have decided this week, actually, with the suggestion from Connor, to talk about startup communities and how they are faring in the light of remote work these days, and more remoteness in general in work. So I think we have a couple more people joining here over the next couple minutes or the next hour. But as always, this is kind of a freestyle session, right? So we just throw everything and anything out we want to talk about in that general topic area.
Cool, man. No, this is cool. And as you're talking, I'm like looking around and checking out because I've never used StreamYard before. So I'll tell you what, man. Hey, while it's just us while we're waiting on Jordan, maybe let's kick it off with kind of what we were chatting about before, going off Startup Community's book.
Sure.
I got the chance to chat with Jordan last night, and so I was kind of updating him on the whole approach with Southwest Florida Tech. And hey, Zarella.
Hey, Z.
Hey, guys.
How's it going?
Hey, Emmy. Good.
Hi.
Hey, Connor.
How you doing, Zarella?
Good. Very good. Long time no see you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. We're chatting about kind of Israel, going off with even our conversation that we had about a week ago, startup communities. Me and Sven got the chance to chat the other day, and Jordan and I got the chance to chat last night. I know you two are meeting this afternoon. So on that note, it's super cool that Jordan, myself, we're getting kind of drawn into the picture with you two. Because I know you two, I easily can consider you two, pioneers, I think, of the South Florida tech ecosystem. So, very excited that we're still able to, keep the kind of the dots, still connected, especially with somebody like Jordan, who we know is going to be here for the next 5 or so years.
Yeah, totally. I have heard great things about him, so I'm excited to meet him.
Definitely. We were chatting about just the concept of going off our conversations, Rella, needing, some sort of like a website, like a virtual foreground, if you would, where somebody who's anybody, when they want to find out what's going on in the Southwest Florida tech ecosystem, can go to that, that site, that landing page, whatever it is, find out about Southwest Florida coders, about Southwest Florida tech, about Python, Southwest Florida Sec, so on and so forth. Took it very well, and so I'm excited. Maybe we'll be able to see that come to life. And there he is.
Hi, Jordan.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing well.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Just in the car, so apologize for the no video.
No worries. All right. Yeah. So Connor was just giving kind of an overview, an intro at how everyone is connected, and what everyone is talking about. I think we're all in one way or another startup community, dare I say it, leaders, at the very least, aspiring to inspire. That just came to me. Something in our startup ecosystems, right? And now we have also Peter joining us. I am assuming that's Peter Oxedy, who also, of course, is a very, very involved leader in the startup ecosystem here in Southwest Florida. So far we have all local people, which is kind of cool. I think we have a couple people maybe joining from across the country from the co-starting ecosystem, which is remote, right? And that's sort of a bit of the overarching topic I wanted to throw out today. What are today's startup ecosystems challenges? All of us, or most of us, know quite a bit of the unique challenges to our local scene, but also broader speaking, right? What does that look like in today's world? Where are these secondary startup ecosystems going? And by secondary, what I mean is not Silicon Valley, not New York City, not even Austin, right? Not any of the established hubs, but these smaller worlds where there is tech people, there are entrepreneurs, but it's kind of a little bit more difficult to kind of get them on the map or to really make something happen. We all know that we need many, many aspects to have a flourishing startup ecosystem. We need events, we need investment, right? We need money, we need the entrepreneurs, which are certainly at the center of everything. And I think it's a little bit harder to pull all that together if you are not already living in a place where people think, this is the tech scene here, right? Like Silicon Valley, for example. All right, so with that, I'm just going to open it up. If anyone wants to start kind of chiming in on the topic, feel free to do so.
Sven, I would love to hear you elaborate a little bit more on what we were chatting about the other day and your perspective on there really not being maybe some, any likelihood of any new cities being able to obtain a startup ecosystem.
Yeah. So also everyone on the call, I think, already knows me well enough that they know I'm a pretty extreme thinker. So it's either black or it's white. There's not much in between, right? And that's not necessarily how the world works, but that's how I approach it. And what Connor is referring to there is that with co-starting and with everything I believe in now is that I have pretty much given up on the local startup ecosystem. That is certainly impacted by my experience over the last years. But I believe that there is a lot of potential. I'm not saying that it's not possible for any smaller startup ecosystems to still evolve. However, I decided to focus my attention on something which has a remote first concept, right? A value, like really embracing that remote firstness and building the programs and the events and everything we're doing, specifically for me with co-starting around that, right? And because I believe that if it works remote, it will also work in person, at least much simpler, right? Going from remote to in-person is going to be much, much easier than going from in-person to remote. And I think we've seen this over the last, year and a half, where with people who might have not worked remote before, that's not easy, right? That's not an easy switch. So that's kind of the core motivation for this. And then selfishly, quite honestly, I like to travel. I don't want to be tied down. I think as tech entrepreneurs, especially, we can work from anywhere. And I think we should embrace that, right? So that's the general motivation for that. There we go. Jordan has a camera now as well. Excellent. So does that kind of lead the direction in that question, Connor, a little bit, or was that too generic?
No, that was great. That was great. I just thought I think it's a very interesting point that you have, and so I wanted to have you share with everyone. And what I think, so I was thinking about this the other day, is Sven, going off your point, I think that places, I'm just going to use South Dakota just as an example, not to specify it, but just as an example, that with maybe other could have been metropolitan cities, maybe what could have been a Silicon Valley or what could have been in the next Austin, to your point, maybe these types of pockets, a little bit more of the suburban pockets like South Dakota that has some potential but may not reach a full tech ecosystem. Well, maybe areas like this can capture all of those tech entrepreneurs, just people working in tech that are leaving those could be metropolitan areas to places more like this, and thus creating still some form of a community that is still very like-minded. May not be a full tech ecosystem, but I think there could be a lot of demographics to capture of those leaving that could have been Austins and coming to the Southwest Florida and stuff like that. So I think there's still going to be value that comes off kind of what the point is you're making, then, which I could totally see that a lot of truth behind that.
I agree with that, and I think that's an interesting road to go down on because, again, from the nomad kind of culture, again, I'm mostly specifically talking about like the tech entrepreneurs, right? Because this certainly does not apply to everyone, but we are all kind of in that bucket. And I think what we're going to see more and more is that migration from cities, right? We've seen it over the pandemic, like out of cities, people are more inclined to go kind of to the country, however much that for them individually. So I think you're right. I think what the local municipalities or the local, the people who want to see their local ecosystem grow need to ask themselves is maybe not how do we attract people forever anymore, right? I think that's an interesting question to pose to the rest of you. What do you think about that notion of, is there a way of how we looked at, co-working and kind of extend that concept to a region? I talked to someone the other day who works for WeWork, and there is a concept out there now, and there's a couple companies doing this, where you have these hubs all across the world where you can live and work, right? Call it co-living. I don't know which direction we are going with this, but certainly Southwest Florida has the potential to maybe recoin the term snowbird, right? Could there be such a thing as tech snowbirds, where it's not maybe just the elderly generation who, you know, lives in New York, upstate New York in the summer and here in the winter, but maybe it's us, right? So maybe, Peter, maybe you have an opinion on that, kind of from what you've seen working a long time in this ecosystem, and I think with entrepreneurs around the country.
I mean, there are certain changes that are yet we don't know how it works out. So with this, we had the technology, but just now we are kind of forced to do this, what we are doing here. You know, it's a couple of years ago we would have done this in person. So definitely we need to figure this out of how this is gonna work. This will, I think, just help to create better local ecosystems. I would even go a little bit more narrow with the definition, more like startup communities, because an ecosystem is more than just the startup community. And then even beyond that, there are certain larger systems. But if we're just talking about the startup community, even within that, there are all sorts. I mean, tech is certainly our favorite angle in this. But we have, of course, social entrepreneurs, and we have small business type of entrepreneurs, which is a separate category, even though when somebody says entrepreneur, they think everybody is an entrepreneur. True, but still, that's a very different type of entrepreneurship. Usually more of a growth, not a high growth or scaling type of businesses. So they are all part of the startup community. And that's a narrower definition than an ecosystem. And also even narrower than that, there is a certain, it's not just a notion, but the proven concept and the proven fact is that there is a so-called geography of innovation. So this was researched in various locations as small as ours, you know, Fort Myers or the area, Southwest Florida is relatively small metropolitan area. And this geography of innovation is within a certain area. If certain elements come together, the right mix and the right density, then much greater innovation starts and many more startups emerge. So, you know, we still remain humans, even though we are doing many things in a virtual environment. So that still requires that kind of bumping into each other and having those kinds of conversations in person, not just in a virtual environment. And how we mix the virtual environment into it will be a big, big question, and how that's gonna actually be effective in that whole notion of geography of innovation. So, but I think this could really help some of the ecosystems or startup communities like ours to be more vibrant, because others can connect in. And I like that notion of, yeah, there could be people migrating here, but you know, people want the vibrancy. So it would be difficult to attract them just because we have good weather. That's why the seniors are here, okay? And also there are different generations, and different generations have different needs in this. So most of you are younger than me, and that's just how it is. So your generation is differently attaching themselves to startups, or how you want to start startups. But you know, there is again a big research, actually 2.7 million startups were researched, and that says that the average age is actually 45. Actually, a 60-year-old startup founder has 3 times more likelihood of creating a successful startup than a 30-year-old. So, and we are not addressing that age category at all. All the incubators or workshops, everything, we are inviting the young kids and saying, you have the great ideas. And that's true many times, but they don't have the experience. And, idea is great, but execution is really where everything will be decided. So that's, and that really a little bit more adjusting to probably the average age of our community, and maybe appealing to that age group between 40 and 60, maybe something where we could start to create that vibrancy and providing that kind of openness. The other problem is that in our schools, and I talk to most of the school leaders in this region, from technical colleges through universities, and everybody is being trained as an employee. And of course, we have the runway program at FGCU, but that's unfortunately a drop in the ocean. And a lot of those kids go somewhere else, okay? A very important part of a good startup community is the love of the community. You have to have that. Otherwise, there is no roots. So, they're just gonna go wherever they're gonna go. So that's an important aspect also. And also universities as well as colleges to understand that kind of mindset and training for that kind of mindset. And some are very open to it. They just don't have the right either tools or channels or whatever, or support from the local government. And some just don't even think that way. So that's, look, there is no Silicon Valley. There is only one Silicon Valley, okay? Every startup community is very unique. You can't create what's there. You need to create what's here, okay? So that's, everybody's, oh yeah, we just copy that. You can't, unfortunately. We need to create, there are certain elements, of course, the stakeholders of, the leaders, the feeders and the instigators within these types of ecosystems. But there is a very unique mix of why it becomes vibrant, why density is created. And we haven't yet figured that out, okay? So I'm putting together that whole kind of baseline report for our own region here, and figuring some out of what we could do where we are right now. But these are so-called adaptive complex systems. There is no formula. It's all emerging patterns. And what emerges, we don't know yet. And what you need to pull in the system and push, because you cannot control it. You can only influence it. And that's the big problem. When universities and governments approach this, they try to control it. You can't, okay? Because those organizations try to control it because they are a hierarchical organization. That's what they got used to, okay? Control system. But this is a bottom up, okay? These kinds of adaptive systems are bottom up. So that's why the leaders need to be the entrepreneurs. They cannot, a university cannot be, a government cannot be, any kind of NGO cannot be. Okay, they can be feeders, or they can be the instigators of helping it, but the entrepreneurs need to be, and their interactions need to be that nucleus which creates that kind of vibrancy or density ultimately. Okay, and we just haven't yet figured out the mix.
Hey Peter, I just got to chime in. You're making a great point right now, and I'm going to let you keep going. What have you maybe in your experience seen when there is maybe a specific university who thinks and it tries to act like they're the leader of the entire region and silo themselves off? What have you seen maybe work well when the university is not being the feeder that they should be, to use the terminology that I totally don't know you're going off of? So what have you seen kind of work well when there's such friction going on between two different elements that are so important to the community?
Before you answer that, I'll double down on that even and say that the general problem, which I have seen many times in different areas, right, is that is that very linear thinking, right? Where I think everyone on this call knows a startup community only works if everyone works together, if there's transparency, if there's openness, or at least let's say it will work better, faster, and more efficiently. And I think Connor's question is, how do you change that maybe antiquated mindset of, no, we know what we are doing. This is what we are doing. We don't need help. We don't want to interface because IP, because whatever the reasons might be, right? How do you change these people, which are usually quite influential in what they're doing, and as a university is usually pretty well established, right? And I guess we all probably at one point in our careers have asked ourselves, how do we get those guys on the same page, right? And how do we get them to open it?
You can't. Those people have their thoughts and they are very, set in that. There are some potential benchmarks of where it works, but they are very, very rare. Basically taking MIT and Stanford and that's it, almost like that's the end of the list. And why? Because every professor in those universities are entrepreneurs. Okay? So they created that bottom-up type of culture instead of trying a university administration trying to control that kind of community. Okay? Universities are great, and that's their role, providing that kind of training for that kind of mindset of young people, as well as creating an environment of where convening can happen of the community. That's great, okay? And providing the necessary technical knowledge in engineering, for example, that's their role. That's where that's the part within the ecosystem, the layer is where they are, okay? And unless they can create that kind of culture, like in those specific universities, it's just not going to work. And that's actually, it's going to screw it up because you are trying to do something which just from the system knowledge, we know it's not going to work. And they're trying to force it because they think, as somebody said it here, we got it all figured out. Okay? No, we don't. Complex systems cannot be figured out. They are infinitely complex and they are adaptive, which means as soon as you do something with it, it changes. Oh, again, so that's why there are only emerging, that's why you can influence it, trying to get the right environment around it, and hopefully it emerges. And then if it's not, you need to do something else until it does. So that's the mistake of the intellect in this case, that they're trying to think like a complicated system, not a complex system. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that, a lot in those couple minutes here already, but I want to kind of get the thoughts from Sorella and Jordan as well a little bit, and I think. Maybe Sorella, one question I wanted to ask you, maybe going back just a couple minutes, where you have experience in, starting some of these groups, leading some of these groups from a grassroots perspective, right? And I think like some of the notion was it needs to come bottom up. I know certainly the two of us, we have talked about that many times. As a matter of fact, we tried to start something called the Grassroots Tech Alliance once before. Couldn't be any clearer from the name.
Yeah.
But over the years now, what was your experience with having led in-person meetings as well as virtual meetings, and how did you see the community react to that? Do you see like a hybrid version? Was one better? Did it significantly decrease once it went virtual? How was your experience?
Well, I think we have gone through all phases. I feel like at the beginning, obviously, when we didn't know what direction this pandemic was going to take, everybody was willing to just continue the meetings remote. And one great thing about it, and I'm not just speaking for my group, but also for new groups that emerge. Like there's, just to give you an example, PyLadies. They were super new. They had their first event right before the pandemic. and they were just starting, so there wasn't really too many attendees at the first one. And for them, I feel like this remote experience has been like a great way to grow, because she was Inessa, who is the organizer, she was able to find speakers that we will not have locally, like people that work for Twitter, people that have been doing the conference at PyCon, that kind of things. Same thing has been happening with Evie. So I feel like for somebody that is just starting a meetup, I think it's been great. It's been the best way to find people that you will not otherwise pay them, or you will not have the money to pay them and give a talk locally, right? So I think that was great. Obviously, people miss the factor that we do networking after every talk. The coders group is like very tight. We're like, I don't know, I have people that had say like, I don't go anywhere. I don't like to go out. I don't go anywhere. The only time that I go out once a month is here. And it's because you're able to meet your own kind of people. You're able to talk to other devs. You can talk code. You can talk programming stuff. And a lot of people miss that. Now with the vaccines being around the corner, we have decided to actually become hybrid, at least as a transition, because we want to be able to serve both. Obviously, not everybody has been vaccinated. There are some people that don't even want the vaccine. Some might don't even have it for health reasons. They can have the vaccines, but they still want to be careful. So we just want to be respectful of everybody and safe. So we're probably going to start doing our next event hybrid. But yeah, to your talk, I think it's been a great experience for us. Most of developers are really used to the remote life anyways. Most of us live on Slack. That's our permanent address. So all the communication has been going through that. We miss meeting in person, obviously, and hopefully next month we'll be back. But yeah, I think it's all a matter of like seeing those opportunities that have been missed. I was actually surprised, like the first remote events that we had people from other states, even from other countries. And I was like, okay, this is awesome because we can see them and everything. But as a guest, it's like, they're not going to come back here ever, So I feel like the benefit is mostly as a speaker, what we can provide to our members. If the speaker is from another place, we can have somebody from California or something. But we also had a lot of people that we have never met in person that are from the area, and they are still finding us. So it's kind of cool that even though we're not doing events, even though we're doing a remote, they still find a way to connect with us because they know we are their community local meetup, and they just want to be on our radar. So once we start meeting in person, they definitely want to come. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool. I would be curious. This might be going in too much detail, but we should talk about. I would love to learn how you found those people, or how they found you, like from across the country, right? Probably through the speakers and all of that, I would imagine. But that's very good to hear. And that makes sense, right? Like certainly the human angle on that very low level of the startup community, right? Like these meetups, these groups of like-minded people. That's what it is about, and that's what's hard to replicate online, right? Like these conversations around a table with a cup of coffee or a beer, where you just context switch and talk to everyone. Kind of, you can't do that online so well. But Jordan, like you've been quiet. Like I know you are working on a somewhat new, I think it's about a year old, right? Emerge initiative where you're trying to kind of invigorate the Southwest Florida community. Startup community a little bit. What's your thoughts and approach with all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, remote events and virtual experiences are not going anywhere. I think it depends on, it depends on what the group is and what their goals are, right? So, for certain communities or, like co-starting, for instance, your model is very much geared towards the remote capability, right? But if we're talking specifically about a local tech ecosystem, you know, a local startup or entrepreneur community, whatever you want to call it, I really do think you have to have that in-person piece of the puzzle. So maybe, you know, Sven, that kind of goes into your conversation about, is the local startup community dead? You know, is that something that we can see pop up in new markets? You know, and then you think about an area like Southwest Florida, which is just way behind the times when it comes to technology. So we're here on the cutting edge, and they're way back here, and we're trying to bridge that gap. So just getting people to attend virtual events was a struggle at first. You know, in the beginning of COVID, people had no idea. Now everybody can use Zoom, everybody can use Google Meet, or, you know, or whatever new platform they have access to. They'll figure it out. Most people can figure it out now. So that opens up a whole new world of possibilities for virtual and hybrid events, which is awesome. But I still think, to your point, Sven, that face-to-face contact, that in-person, you know, community feel, I really think there's something to be said about the term community. You know, you can have a virtual community. Absolutely. There's so many out there. And I think that's, you know, a good direction to head. If you have an idea for something that can change the world, start with creating a virtual community and then grow from there, right? But I still think if we're talking about like Southwest Florida specifically, how do we create this tech ecosystem? How do we invigorate the community? You know, we call them the legacy institutions, right? The county government, the local municipalities, the universities, the big corporations locally here. You know, those are the kind of traditional institutions. So you start talking about how do we invigorate those groups to actually get involved and help support what we're doing, and, you know, work together and break down those walls. I mean, I think in person is just so important to that piece of it. So going back to some of what you were saying, Peter, because I can speak to Southwest Florida. I was born and raised in Fort Myers. So, you know, I know a lot of people here in the area. I have a lot of connections. And so over the last year, Sven, while trying to kind of get some momentum with this Emerge initiative, I have realized that the traditional route of saying, okay, we're going to partner with FGCU, we're going to partner with the Lee EDO, or we're going to partner with the city of Fort Myers, or whatever it is at the top level, it doesn't work. It will never work. They will never see the value. They'll never buy in. They're not going to give you a shred of anything. But if you find the right person within each of those organizations, maybe they're at a mid-level, you know, maybe they're a little bit higher up in the pecking order, but they're certainly not the person at the top. That's the only way. And so we've kind of figured, we've had that. And maybe, Sven, maybe you had this 5 years ago, this revelation. And, you know, this is why these types of communities are important, because we can learn from each other and not have to make the same mistakes, right? But over the last few months, or 6 months, really, we've kind of realized, we said, you know what? We're banging our heads against the wall. We're trying to get people to get on board with something that they don't even understand, let alone do they want to help. You know, they don't see the value. And so I think it's finding the right people that get it, that are like-minded, that understand it. And so, like, for instance, I had a meeting with the mayor of Fort Myers a couple weeks ago, and I used the term tech ecosystem in our conversation. And he straight up said, he said, what? What is that? What did you want to create a what? And I was just like, okay. Meanwhile, you've got the mayor of Miami over here, and every other word out of his mouth is tech ecosystem. So it just goes to show you, like, we're not even close. Like, you can't, to your point, Sven, you can't take the Silicon Valley or the Austin or New York or even the Miami model and apply it to Southwest Florida. It's not going to work. There's no chance in hell it's going to succeed. And so I really think of it as more of a decentralized approach, right? What's important for Southwest Florida is important for Southwest Florida, uniquely to Southwest Florida, to the businesses here, to the people here, the demographics. And you could break it down even further. What's important to Fort Myers is different from what's important in Estero, which is different from what's important to Naples. And you could break it down that granularly. And then you start to say, okay, let's say we did have a tech ecosystem in Southwest Florida. Well, you know, it's the same thing. What's important for the Southwest Florida Coders Group is different from what's important to the Southwest Florida SEC, to, you know what I mean, the Pi Ladies, et cetera, et cetera. We can all work together, but I think the concept of having some overarching, body making the decisions and saying, okay, here's what everyone needs to do. It's just not realistic. Not only is it not realistic, but it's fundamentally flawed, because you have people like Dr. K, I hate to say it, but who's wants her world to be the baby and not let anybody else in. You have people like John Talmadge who are doing great things for the community, but it's the EDO or nothing, So it's something that I certainly, want to make sure that we're all working together, and the Dr. K's of the world who are doing some incredible things over at FGCU, understand that there's people in Southwest Florida who are trying to do similar things. And, that the Runway program is an incredible program, and we need to bring more awareness and attention to it. You know what I mean? And we need to use that as a feeder for the Southwest Florida tech ecosystem. Peter, you mentioned it. A lot of people are leaving those programs, after they graduate, they're leaving Southwest Florida. So how can we turn that around and incentivize those, future entrepreneurs or current entrepreneurs, who want to create a business to stay here and create their business here?
So
Jordan, that is kind of a missing link that I feel.
I want to jump in there because I think this is a good one to also say hi to Ray. Good point here, where I know Ray has a lot of experience in the virtual communities, right? Like at least that's how we met. We talk a lot about this, and you're saying now this is something I was kind of starting to think about myself. That approach, I used to say the same thing 5 years ago. We need to keep the talent here. I'm starting to question that. Do we? Does that actually matter as long as we keep those people engaged in our community? And, Sorella was mentioning maybe the future is kind of a hybrid community. Be great if we have in-person events, but maybe we can just keep those people engaged, right? Have them still feel their roots here. Maybe if they came through the education system here, however, whatever those roots are, because look, if you feel close to something like that community, I am still involved with people from the previous startup communities I've lived in, right? But not because I wanted to live there, because of the people, right? And that's kind of, I think, the question I'm asking is, does it matter if you're local, or can you create a community also beyond, the geographic boundaries? And that's not a direct question, but Ray, what you heard in the last couple of minutes, and from the topic, what are your thoughts on startup communities, local versus remote, and what have you seen in your career, and what has worked for you?
Well, what I've seen in startup communities has been the thing that brings people together has been pretty straightforwardly the same thing: money. Where there is money, there is pull to bring people together. People will come together because that's where the money is, right? So like when I've seen people in Boston, which I spend a lot of time in, the organizations and the ones that pull people together are the ones who either have the funded entrepreneurs there, hey, how can I be more like them? Or have the capitalists there. And often what you find are that the higher quality ones are the ones where the capitalists are also trolling the room looking to find their investments, and the potential investments are trolling the room trying to find their capital, So I think that trying to make a community happen is a hard thing if you don't have that gravitational force. And I think the gravitational force doesn't have to be money. I think just money is the easiest one, right? Much like, a star at the center of a solar system. So if there is money there, then you can be pulling these entrepreneurial communities together. Instead of you trying to make it happen, it will get pulled. So the way I would start is, where's the capital? And can capital be coming into this community? Because if capital comes into the community, then businesses come in. If businesses come in, then jobs come in. If jobs come in, then you have the political structure saying, wait, jobs, let's go get some more jobs. This is going to help us stay in office, et cetera. And that's actually what's sort of happening down in Miami, as well as Austin and some of these other tech centers that are starting to form, where the cost of living is less than what it is in like Silicon Valley. So you start starting to see the dispersal. But that dispersal starts with the money, right? Where you're seeing people like Rebois, who's moved himself over to, I think, Miami area, right? Bear and some of these others who are in Texas, being able to bring that out there. So the one of the interesting things about online communities, just switching over to the other part, is how little, it seems to me, they've been structured on money, right? The amazing thing that Cortland Allen did over at Indie Hackers was be able to build a community around being a startup where he didn't have the gravitational pull, right, of being a source of capital or bringing sources of capital together. It was all very independent, but through keeping the costs low and bringing together a dispersed set of people who are relatively committed to keeping their costs low, he was able to create a community using this alternative force. So I think when you're asking about how do you build a community, the question is going to be, what is going to be that gravitational pull? And also, what are the costs that you're going to have to support? And because the higher the costs, the more gravity is going to be necessary to pull it together. And this was sort of more naturally available in like the major tech hubs. You're starting to see it in some of the more growth tech hubs, like the one that's so close to you right now. But that'd be the question I try to figure out is can you bring money in, or can you decrease the cost such that you can do something which doesn't require that level of capital investment? Does that make sense? That's sort of my take based on what I've been hearing so far.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting.
I mean, I think that a big problem with the legacy institutions is they follow the money. They follow the corporate sponsors and what's going to make them look better. I hate to say it, but that's just what it is. Versus what's going to be the most value to the entrepreneurs, to the startup founders, to the tech, the people in the tech industry who want to get their idea off the ground. So I like the grassroots approach better. I think creating a nucleus, you said gravitational pull, I'll use a different term. I think creating a nucleus of local tech companies, local startup founders, entrepreneurs, people who have success stories locally that can share their ideas and share their concepts together and help each other lift up from the bottom. Then you create a nucleus. Now, those legacy institutions, those, the county, the cities, the FGCU, the universities, they're drawn to that. Now they say, okay, how can we help? How can we get involved? How can we get a piece of this action? So to me, I've kind of flipped that on its head in my mind, just because I've seen people try and fail so many times the other way, okay, if you can find some capital, then yes, obviously that's going to bring a lot of value and bring a lot of opportunity. But I think, creating the model to say, where can we find the money? And until we find the money, there's nothing we can really do, substantially. I think that's what everyone's kind of tried and failed. And I think we have to think about doing something different, I guess.
So Jordan, this is a very interesting point, and I have a personal kind of connection to that one, because I think in our specific region, I think smaller regions in general, that tends to happen. You have certain people, usually a fairly small amount of people, who want to make an impact, help the tide rise and all of that, right? Those leader entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call them. And I totally agree with you. As a matter of fact, but that's how Peter and I met. We used to say, I used to tell him, when he was a part of an accelerator here locally, let's just pick one or two startups and nurture the shit out of them, right? Now, the problem you have with that is, first of all, we have the deal flow problem, right? Because chicken and egg, we don't really have a lot of promising startups yet. But we could still probably find one or two. Now, but the ones you find and the people you need to nurture them, are gonna get burned out so quickly, because of course what we all need to do is also build our own companies, right? Make our own life sustainable. And that's what has happened in this region, I think, a lot. And I think which is the problem, why money is the easy answer. If you have the money, then you don't have to worry about that part as much. If you go all the way to the other side and say, maybe you can have like a mindset where you all gravitate around, right? Whatever it is. Maybe we incorporate a new city where there's cost of live, like it's free housing for entrepreneurs. I don't know, right? Like something else. But I think that finding those success stories is much easier in theory than in practice, right? Because I think, Sorella, we had countless conversations about this, right? Like everyone I know, we constantly talk about this. And I personally have switched to okay, that's not going to work. I will need to make myself a success story. And then sure, I'll share, right? And I think the more people we have thinking like this, the entrepreneurs themselves, then it would work. And I think what we see in this, and this is why I like the comparison to the online world a lot, is having that works right now for a lot of people, like the indie hacker types, the solopreneurs, right? Building in public on Twitter. But it works, and it seems to be such a big thing because, of course, now we're looking nationwide, potentially worldwide, and it's still, fairly small community, right? Like once you dive in there, it's a couple hundred people you follow pretty quickly, and they keep popping up. So I think at the end of the day, it's a deal flow problem, really, if you want to approach it like that. Unless you have the money. If you have the money, you get the deal flow.
Right, exactly. And I think that's kind of where Ray's second example of, okay, well, how do we bring down that barrier of entry? That's the other, if money, just injecting a bunch of money isn't the answer, then how do we bring the barrier down so that more, to your point, Sven, we can get more entrepreneurs, you grow that community, you get more startups popping up. So then now your deal flow problem is solved and maybe not solved, but it's less. And then you have a better chance of finding your success stories. And, the math starts to work out a little bit better. I think that from my perspective, being in the tech space, working for a company that does custom software development, mobile app development, we create technology for businesses every single day. And a big thing that we're very passionate about, or I'm very passionate about, is working with small businesses and mid-sized businesses, because we all know the corporations and the governments can afford to invest in artificial intelligence and, all the cutting edge emerging technology that's out there. But most small businesses, either they have no idea or they don't have the capability, they don't have the expertise or the funds to invest into it. I think lowering the bar to the, early stage startups, the entrepreneurs or wish to be entrepreneurs, and even the small business owners that have been in business for 20 or 30 years and are looking to do digital transformation, or maybe they're in the construction industry and they have an idea to build a software and overnight they can become a tech company. Like, those are the types of things that I think when you start talking about lowering the barrier of entry, you become a more inclusive community, and the value that you're bringing is not just following the money type of thing. That I think is powerful for people. If you want to incite, action in people, I think you have to, reach them on a very personal level. And I think, to Sven's point, if you just throw a bunch of money out there and then you the rest of the equation becomes less important. And I think you have to have both sides, otherwise it won't be balanced. That's my big takeaway, I guess.
To raise a question, comment on the chat. I am not an entrepreneur, but I am the organizer of a meetup, which is the largest one in our area. So nice meeting you, Ray. But I can see a few similarities, and I can say something that I can see a community of startups growing, kind of how it happened with us. And I know this is going to sound weird, but for us was like organically. We didn't really force anything. And we to that point where we didn't even ask for sponsors, they come to us and they give us money. Even something that you mentioned, Jordan, just to give an example of TCU, right? Trying to get them to help others as an institution is hard, but if you have one person that is in there that is willing to do it, they will do it. And that actually has been our case, because we have a super close connection to the software engineering program. The Professor Scott Vancelot, who is in charge of the entire group, is very close with us. Their students come to our meetups. We've been there as speakers. A lot of them are on our chat. So we share a lot of things. I have had, I forgot what was his name, the previous chair of the FGCU program. What was his name? Dr. Oh, I can't remember his name. He moved to Seattle now, but he was the one that came to us, and he was like, hey, what you guys need, please let us know what we can do to help you. And something that we have seen, and that's something that we're super proud on the group, is that a lot of the students that have come to our meetups have ended up connecting with local employers, and they stay in the area, so that for us is a big deal. And I wish Peter was here, because I know he's part of the Future Makers Coalition from the Community Foundation, and something that they do, or one of their goals, is how do you increase helping on the job market, which we kind of do that through our meetups, and also trying to retain the talent locally. So I feel like our events have helped with that. And we also have had people that have moved to other places, but like Sven said, even though they move away, they're still very close to our community. Just to give you an example, there was somebody that came to one of our meetups, didn't have a job at the time, and he ended up meeting the people from Fly Dogs. He ended up working there at Fly Dogs. He then wanted to be our speaker, and he was super grateful for the meetup, because that's how he ended up there. He is now working at Amazon. He moved to work for Amazon. He works for AWS, but he's still very close to us. He still does things within the group. He when somebody needs to be mentored or something, he's there to help. And those kind of things is it just happened organically. We didn't force anything. And it's just amazing to see those kind of things. And I feel like something that have helped the group, and that I can see that it could help also on the startup community, or entrepreneurs group, is just being like-minded. When people are like-minded, it's so much easier to make good friends. When I met Sven, it's crazy. We knew so much to talk about. We became super close friends, so easy. Because I feel like these groups, these events, and these meetups, what it gives you is a filter. I don't know about you, but once you're older, it's kind of hard to make good friends, just because you have all these many things that a person has to check on your list for you to be friends with a person, right? So a meetup like this and a group like that, does that work for you? Because the people that are going to be there, they're already how you need them to be. They're already aligned with you. And I feel like being on groups that everybody aligns themselves with what they do, it helps a lot, because that's when everybody start working together, and they just do it just for the good of it, without really wanting something, so yeah, that's been the experience for us.
I think that's some of the gravitational pull in our very small, very fragile ecosystem is certainly your group, right? And I think more of that kind of thing will create that. Now, I do have to say, I think for the individual entrepreneur, right, that organicness is more or less possible for different people, because if you don't have funding, or you can't, even if you have funding, then your VCs usually don't allow you to just kind of, grow slow, right? Growth is kind of the name of the game. So I think there is somewhere in between those two things, right, is the startup community, where you need to be able to support the entrepreneurs. They need to be able to support themselves, but you also do need to allow the community to develop organically and figure out, we said it before, you guys all said it before, what is the uniqueness of a local startup ecosystem?
So if I might, Zarela, is that how I pronounce your name? Okay. I apologize for the imperfections of that. I thought that where you were going was quite interesting, right? Because usually when we think about startup ecosystem, we're thinking about businesses that are running or being formed inside a certain geographic area when we think about a local community. But that's only, but where you live, your residence, is only one form of affinity, right? There are also professional affinities, and this basically is the way indie hackers work, right? You take out the geographic part and you put in the fact that we're all doing the same thing or have a similar set of values, like with the microconf community or what have you. But you have a really different access, right? You have the affinity of alumni, right? People who have gone to your institution, people who have left your institution and gone to do other great things, which might involve entrepreneurship, might involve sort of proto-entrepreneurship, i.e. getting the sort of qualifying jobs at AWS and what have you. And as a graduate of an Ivy League institution, I'll tell you, this is something they invest a lot in, right? Is maintaining the connection with the alumni on the assumption that at least some of them are going to turn out to do some great things. So I'm wondering, like, in the context of your program in particular, where you talked about like the professor, right, who was involved in the community when you were there and then goes to Seattle, your graduate, right, who was very active in your community, works for someone local, and then goes off to work for AWS, presumably again up in the Pacific Northwest. What do you do to maintain the connection and relationships, right, with those people, and connect the students and the young people and the people who have come back home with those folks to sort of try to enhance that community? What do you go through right now for that?
So I have a meetup group that is for developers. We are called Southwest Florida Coders because we don't want to be just developers. We want people that also want to be developers. So we're like super welcoming. Really the networking is what has been able to keep the connection, and something that I actually learned from Sven is like, you go to all the events, you like send an invite on LinkedIn, telling them who you were, have a conversation, and really just like, you know, like even growing the LinkedIn network, it helped. But right now we connect a lot through Slack. So that's kind of how like people is able to bring back to the community. Like some of the ones that have moved are able to do like their talks from wherever they are, or like somebody needs help on Slack and they help them, you know. That's kind of how it's been. But LinkedIn probably outside of Slack.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate, we need to be wrapping up the call, but that was hugely insightful, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to be your LinkedIn friend, by the way.
There you go. Yeah, that's a really good point to end on, I think, today. At the end of the day, it is networking. If it is virtual or not, it's a little bit harder, maybe non-virtual, right? But if anyone watching this at any point, if you want to take anything away, invest in your networking, right? Like build your personal network, build your professional network, because that's going to accelerate you like it, nothing else. Like that has certainly been, time and time again, what I've seen for companies being the biggest impact. So find your people, you know, connect with them, ask for things, right? Some people are always afraid to ask for feedback, ask for help. You might not get it, but if you never ask, you will certainly not get it. So great point to end on. Thank you guys so much for joining today. I hope I'll see you next week or the week after that, and keep working and join the Slack. Slack was a good point as well. I'll send out an invite to you, Jordan.
Awesome. Very nice meeting you, Jordan. See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you later.
Bye, Sven.
Take care.